Every kid in this show is real. Every story is true. And everything you're about to hear really happened. In the year 2010, Easton LaChappelle was 14 years old, a boy growing up in Mancos, Colorado, a tiny town tucked into the mountains, so small that Easton's entire 8th grade class was just 23 kids. Not a city, not a tech hub, a one-stoplight kind of town a long way from anywhere with a robotics lab or an engineering program. Now, here's the thing about Easton. From the time he was little, he couldn't leave a machine alone. Toasters, microwaves, radios. If it had a plug or a battery, sooner or later, Easton had it open on his bedroom floor, wires everywhere, just to see what was inside. And in a town the size of Mancos, there's only so much of that a kid can do before he runs out of things to take apart, and runs out of people who can teach him what's next. So, Easton did the only thing left to do. He went to his room, he got online, and he started teaching himself. Not for school. Nobody assigned this. He was just bored. And the internet, it turned out, had a lot to say. Motor by motor, video by video, website by website. He didn't know how a servo motor worked, so he learned. He didn't know how to wire a circuit, he learned that too. And one day, sitting in that same small bedroom, Easton decided he was going to build something nobody had asked him to build. A robotic hand. No, not a toy version, a working one, with fingers that could actually curl, actually grip, actually move because he told them to. And his parts? Lego bricks for the frame, fishing line threaded through like tendons so that when a motor pulled, a finger curled, electrical tubing for the fingers themselves, and little motors borrowed from toy airplanes, plus the guts of an old Nintendo Power Glove to make the whole thing move by remote control. Well, he didn't get it right on the first try, or even the 10th. But piece by piece, the hand started doing what he wanted it to do. And when it was finished, Easton had done something almost nobody his age, in a town that size, with no lab and no teacher, had any business doing. He'd built a working robotic hand, by himself, in his bedroom. Easton was proud of his invention, as he should be. So he decided to enter it into the Colorado State Science Fair. He didn't win first place, though, but he didn't need to. Because it was at that fair that something happened that had nothing to do with ribbons or trophies. See, a little girl walked up to his table. She was 7 years old, and she wasn't looking at Easton's hand the way everyone else was. She was looking at it differently, because she was wearing a prosthetic arm of her own. So Easton got to talking with her, and what he learned stopped him cold. Her arm, the one she was wearing right then, the one that didn't move nearly as well as the Lego hand sitting on his table, had cost nearly $80,000. $80,000. And here's the part that made it even worse. She was 7, and kids that age don't stop growing. In a few years, that arm wouldn't fit anymore, and her family would need to buy the next one, and then the one after that. Each one another $80,000, or somewhere close to it. Now, Easton, mind you, is looking down at his own table, at a hand he built in his bedroom, out of Legos, out of fishing line, out of parts from a toy airplane and a video game glove somebody had lying around the house. And he knows his didn't cost $80,000. It barely cost anything at all. Easton would later say, in his own words, that in that exact moment, something in him changed. Before that conversation, he was a kid who built robots because building robots was fun. After, he was a kid who just found out that the thing he was good at, for free, for fun, in his bedroom, might actually be able to fix something that was hurting real families. Because here's a pretty staggering fact. There are more than 40 million amputees in the world, and out of all of them, only about 1 in 20 have access to any prosthetic device at all. 40 million people, and almost none of them had what that 7-year-old girl had, even though what she had was far from perfect and cost more than most families make in a year. So Easton went back to his bedroom, but he wasn't just tinkering anymore. He was trying to solve something. The hand became an arm. The arm got stronger motors, more sensitive sensors, better control. And then Easton got hold of something that changed everything about how fast he could work. A 3D printer, borrowed from a friend. Suddenly, he wasn't limited to whatever Lego pieces and spare parts he happened to have lying around. If he could design a part on a computer, he could print it. If it broke, he could just print another. If it didn't work quite right, he could change the design and print it again that same night in his own bedroom. Version after version, the arm got lighter, smarter, cheaper. And get this, Easton would even figure out how to wire it so it could be controlled by a headset that read the electrical signals from a person's own brain. Think about that. By the time he'd built a full arm and hand out of 3D printed parts, powered in part by a windshield wiper motor, the whole thing cost around $250 to build. $250 versus $80,000. The news of what Easton had accomplished started spreading. In April of 2013, he was invited to Washington, D.C., to the White House, for the 3rd annual White House Science Fair, where kids from all over the country come to show the President of the United States what they've built. Easton packed up his arm and got on a plane. And then, just a few minutes before President Obama reached his table, disaster. The arm slipped off its display stand. It hit the ground. It broke right at the elbow. Think about that for a second. Years of work, a trip across the country, and the one thing he built it to do, shake the president's hand, and it breaks minutes before he gets the chance. But President Obama walked up anyway, and even though the arm couldn't move the way it was supposed to, the president reached out and shook its hand regardless. He told Easton to show his invention to DARPA, the government agency that funds some of the country's most advanced technology research. A broken elbow, a handshake, and a nudge from the President of the United States towards some of the top engineers in the country. Not a bad afternoon for a kid from a town of about 1,000 people. Oof. That same stretch of years, Easton was chosen for something else too, an internship with NASA at the Johnson Space Center, working with the team building humanoid robots called Robonauts. A teenager who taught himself everything he knew from YouTube videos in a bedroom in rural Colorado was now sitting in the same room as NASA engineers working on robots built for space. And still, through all of it, the White House, NASA, the invitations to speak on stage in front of adults, Easton kept coming back to the same room he'd been sitting in since he was 14, trying to make the arm better, cheaper, closer to something a kid could actually wear every day. By the time Easton finished high school, colleges were interested. Scholarships were on the table. And then, in 2014, Easton got a phone call from someone he'd never met. The author and motivational speaker, Tony Robbins. Robbins had heard about the arm and wanted to talk. So they did. And Robbins came away convinced that this teenager wasn't just clever with robots. So, Robbins made Easton an offer, mentorship, and money to build a real company around the arm. Easton had a decision to make. College or this? He chose this. And on February 12, 2014, Easton and Tony Robbins formed a company together. They called it Unlimited Tomorrow. Now, starting a company is not the same as finishing an invention. Easton didn't build one more arm and stop. He and a small team spent years after that, refining the design, working with real companies like Microsoft and Siemens to make the technology better, figuring out how to 3D scan a person's actual arm from far away so the prosthetic would fit them, specifically, without them ever having to travel to a lab. And here's the number that mattered most. Through all of it, 40 million amputees, and almost none of them able to afford what they needed. Easton kept that number in front of him the way he'd kept it in front of him since he was 16. Whatever they built next had to cost less. In 2017, Easton got a phone call from a foundation that works with kids who have limb differences. They wanted to introduce him to a girl. Her name was Momo Sutton. Momo had been wearing a prosthetic hand since she was 4 years old. The kind that's really just a hook, that doesn't bend, doesn't grip the way real fingers do. This time, Easton wasn't building for a stranger at a science fair. He scanned Momo's other arm. He and his team custom built a hand and arm sized exactly for her, shaped to match her, colored to match her skin, right down to the fingers. When Momo put it on for the first time, she didn't wait long to start using it. By lunchtime, she already had favorites. The fist bump, the A-OK sign, things her hand had simply never been able to do before. Think about where this started. A boy, bored, alone in a bedroom in a town of about 1,000 people, taking a toaster apart just to see what was inside. And now, here he was, years later, handing a real, custom-built, moving hand to a real kid who'd been waiting for one her whole life. Unlimited Tomorrow kept going after that. In 2020, the company released its full product, a personalized prosthetic arm called TrueLimb, built for a fraction of what devices like it used to cost. Not free, still real money, but instead of $80,000, a device could now start closer to $8,000, sold straight to the person who needed it, without the extra costs that used to stand in the way. Somewhere out there, right now, there's a kid a lot like that 7-year-old girl from the science fair. A kid who's going to grow and need a new arm and might actually be able to get one now. Here's the truth. Easton didn't build that first hand to help anyone in particular. He built it because he was bored and curious and stuck in a small town with nothing to do. It was only when he left his bedroom and went out into the real world that his creation turned into something bigger than him. So, the next time you make something just because it's fun, just because you're curious, just because you want to know if you can, I want you to remember Easton's Lego hand. You never actually know. Sometimes you build something just for yourself, and it ends up helping a whole lot of other people. This has been another episode of The Kid Who Did What? Everything in today's episode comes from true accounts of Easton LaChappelle's invention of his low-cost robotic prosthetic arm and the company Unlimited Tomorrow. Parents, you'll find all of our sources in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time for another episode of The Kid Who Did What?